Hey everybody! Today we are doing something different. We are diving into the world of 3D animation. So sit back, relax, maybe open up your Cinema 4D, and I'm going to teach you how I made this. All right, here we go. First things first, we are going to go to a website I love. Is called Turbosquid.com. So Turbosquid.com. And this website is basically all the 3D renders and models that you could ever wish for. Some of them are very, very cool. They do cost money, so you do have to purchase a license for them to use them for commercial or personal reasons. And I'm going to type in food packaging. And if not, I'll kind of go and look through what I already had. So I actually ended up getting this one right here. And the reason I did this was I was, kind of looking through some of these things, and it was the closest to my actual product and my package that I could find without having to render and texture this whole thing. The only problem is that I saw this was super thin, right? And I knew that my package needed to be much thicker. So my plan was to then take that into my modeling program, Blender, and increase the thickness of the package. And I'll walk you through how to do that. So anyhow, I added to cart, I bought this thing, and I ended up actually saving one of these front-facing images and maybe the back as well. So simply like I saved a screenshot. And you'll see why I did this later is because I actually used this screenshot to apply a blending mode in Photoshop on the actual image of my UV mapping. So I actually textured it and sort of shaded it, then applied it to the object. We'll talk about all of that later, so I don't want to confuse anyone, but so just so you know why I took that screenshot, I'll bring it up in a bit. Anyhow, I really loved this. This model. It was very detailed. Again, even with the tear notches, everything seemed to be very perfect. It was almost destiny that I bought it. Okay. So let's jump into my folder. There it is. And so before I did anything, I really needed to take this package that I just got, and I needed to go into Blender, my modeling program. You can use Cinema 4D for this, except the file that I downloaded was a .obj file, so I could open it in Blender first. And then I had textured everything and then exported it to Cinema 4D. So let me bring this up, the first one. And it brings me to the sculpting tab, and this is where I actually scaled the z-axis, so the bulkiness of the package. And if we go to scale, you can see right here my z-axis. I put to 2.5, so I'll show you what it was. It was 1, which is okay, but that looks like a pack of playing cards or like one of those handy white packages. Handy white. It's funny how Kleenex and Handy White became the phrases. So we can put that to 2.5 again, and then I can even show you like 6. Obviously, it's going to make that package very chunky, but it's not a bag of chips, so we have to knock that back down to 2.5. So anyhow, 2.5 is what I sort of determined that was about the thickness of the package in the ratio to the rest of it. And I really liked, again, everything on the shading and all of this, how it looked. So I then had to texture map it. So I had to do a couple different things. The first thing I had to do was I had to take my package design that I had already designed in Adobe Illustrator, a little bit of Photoshop, but really mainly Adobe Illustrator. I drew all of my little doodle guys, and I had, all of the nutrition facts and barcode and everything, so it looked very realistic, okay? In terms of, it had to be the exact same package that we sent to print. So this is what I ended up doing. I took that screenshot earlier to show you how I was going to texture this even further, because the render that was rendering from Blender just didn't look as realistic as I wanted it to. So this is what I ended up doing. I actually, I took the screenshot right here, and I put it into Photoshop. And this is a very interesting tip or workaround. And don't ask me how I did it. I was, don't know. I was in a creative mode. But I was like, I need to get this thing to look better rendered without using like an expensive render engine or anything like that. And so this is what I did. This is just a screenshot. You can even see it's like shoddily cropped and everything here. Okay. But I mapped it perfectly to my packaging, matched the tear notches and everything, and the UV map actually came from Blender. So I'll show you how I did that. In Blender, in UV editing, is where I applied the texture. Okay. So let me zoom out of here. Select. And if you select everything there, you'll see the UV map on the left portion, well, in my screen setup. And what the UV map does is it tells Blender that everything on this half is on the one side, and everything on this half is on the other side. And so your file, if you can export this, if you go to UV, export UV layout, and there I just exported a PNG of my UV layout. So you can go ahead and just save it as a PNG. And then what I did was I brought that into my favorite, one of my favorite programs, Photoshop. And you'll see this is my layer that is actually just the UV map, right? And so I could then go in here and get really, really nerdy and specific about where my tear notches are, where the top of my package is, how much of it I wanted to show. And furthermore, I could line up my, my screenshot of the package. Okay. So then you'll see what that did for me was that it applied this like brilliant texture. It almost looks rendered already on each side. So I have one for the left side, the front. In this case, it didn't really matter. In Blender, I would adjust it, and then the back. Okay. Let's see. Maybe I didn't even do the same one. That's kind of cool. So I ended up taking. I ended up taking each screenshot, which just makes it all the more realistic. Okay. So then I saved that as just a PSD file. I call it Salad Bar Wrap 3, and you'll see what I can do with that now. All right, then we're going to go to shading, and this is where things get a little bit tricky. So basically what we have to do is we have to map a UV texture to the base color, and then also connect it to a material output as the surface. Okay. So I followed a fun tutorial for this, which I will link in this tutorial. A tutorial in a tutorial. But basically what you do is you will create a color, right? And this is going to be the texture, your UV map. And then you also need to link this BSDF to a material output, okay? And that's just going to be the surface. So using these nodes, let's go back to UV editing. You'll then use nodes, okay? And you can see, even in the little preview window here, this is what the texture would look like on different objects. So you can kind of just click around in here and see. So it look like grass, salad bar grass, on a Blender object, wrapped and draped on a clothing, like cloth or clothing, and a liquid. So this is great, except what we're going to do is we're going to view it on the package here. So let's go ahead and in our viewport display, go ahead and click on viewport shading. And just like magic, it actually works and looks gorgeous, okay? And really all thanks to Blender and the tutorials that I followed. But this was great because this was one of the first steps that I was then going to have to start to do some crazy animation, which I was debating on using Blender for, but I knew just a very tiny bit about Cinema 4D, so I decided to save it out and jump into Cinema 4D. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll go to File, Export, .obj. File. We'll go to File, Export, OBJ. We'll save out an OBJ file. The next thing I did was I opened up a new Cinema 4D file, and then I imported the OBJ file that I had exported from Blender. That's a tongue twister. And I used Cinema 4D to basically help me animate this, this thing. I actually used Cinema 4D Lite, so I did not use this version. Which is actually really neat because you can still do all of this stuff with Cinema 4D Lite, which is free, especially if you have After Effects. Okay. So what I did was then I brought this up. I simply animated just a couple keyframes. You can see 1, 2, 3 keyframes is all I rendered here. And I was able to achieve the look that I wanted. I then imported it into After Effects, which was where I put all the crazy little things, text and other items and little sparkles, etc. So that might be another video depending on the time that this one takes and or the requests that I get if you really want to see the other one. But mainly this was the heavy lifting. So now let's jump into how I did the bar. The bar was separate, and I had to find a bar. So again, I went to Turbosquid for granola bar. That's it. So I ended up going with this one right here. And even though there was chocolate chips, it had like the very, very same dimensions as our bar, which was awesome. And you can tell rendered, like, it's not the absolute prettiest, but it's somewhat realistic. And this is exactly what we were going for the look and feel of this ad spot. Again, it comes with all of the model, texturing, etc. And again, the UV map that you would apply. So basically what I was going to do was I was going to take my texture of my salad bar and map it onto the UV map. Again, apply it onto the object and do everything exactly the same. And in my Cinema 4D file, I then imported both on the scenes that have both the package and the bar. I imported both OBJ files and then animated them separately. So I'll show you how I UV mapped this, and hopefully this is helpful in some way. Again, it was sort of a workaround and interesting, creative couple days for me, but I ended up figuring out, and I was pretty happy with the final product. So I will show you exactly after the UV mapping process. I then imported them into my Cinema 4D file and animate them each separate. Right? So very, very few keyframes. So no more than 10 there, it looks like. Oops. And yeah, really. You know, I'm not a pro at Cinema 4D or Blender, but this was like one of the best things to learn so that I could really go through and see it and see how things work and see how UV mapping works and see how nodes work. And this project, you know, I even left space intentionally for the text to come in because I knew I was going to do some crazy stuff in After Effects. And After Effects, I'm much more familiar with and comfortable. So if I did have to do any editing as far as masking out anything or any tricky stuff, I was pretty confident that I could do that in After Effects. But the motion and all of that needed to feel right in Cinema 4D, and I was beyond happy with the animation. Again, I only set up keyframes, you know, I just did a little bit of keyframing and I moved the objects around. I had to make sure that I was on the correct object for each one. But, you know, Cinema 4D has like this brilliant way of just making things feel a little smoother. And so I really didn't have to do much. Awesome. Well, I hope that was helpful, and I hope that this tutorial was concise or succinct enough for you to get as much information in as little bit of time as you wanted. And if you have any other questions or want to throw me a challenge to work on a project, I am going to be diving into Cinema 4D a lot more than I already have been, and so this should be fun. All right, thanks for joining, and see you next time.